Well, Jillian O'Hanrahan is on the line with us here, and we're going to talk about her book, The Misadventures of My Non-Love Life. How are you today, Jillian?
I'm great. Really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, what's the inspiration behind this book?
It's all about my tragic comedy dating love life, to be honest. So over years and years of being single and dating, I've, like many people now, have had some fun and some awkward dates. And the phrase that just kept coming back over and over again when I would catch up with friends over drinks or over brunch was, geez, Gillian, you could write a book with the amount of stories you've got here. You could write a book with the amount of stories. And one day I just thought, screw it, I'm going to write a book with all these stories. So it's a summary of my own tales, possibly with a little dramatic twist on them.
And when you first started out, were you maybe a bit nervous about sharing your love life in this way?
Yeah, definitely. Like it's very explicit.
Yeah.
It's not exactly one I'd be passing around at Christmas dinner, shall we say? But the reason I wrote it is because honestly, I didn't want for other young women to suffer the way I had suffered.
Mm.
So I think that, these awkward dates, some of it was my own doing, and I just didn't realize it. So I thought it would be more valuable to put in those really awkward, uncomfortable parts because I think we talk a lot about, we see other people's highlight reels on their Instagram feeds, for example,
Yeah.
but they don't really talk about the awkward, like unsafe, vulnerable moments that they have. So while I try to make it, and I think I do make it very fun, of course, but I'm totally biased.
Yeah.
The reason I wrote it is because I want for other, particularly young women, to see I don't have to put myself through this. Like this can and this should be fun. So that's why it's really important for me to write it and to write it honestly and openly. And there's a few parts there that are so honest and open, like I didn't read them back at the final review because I knew it would be, if I did, I'd take them out.
Yeah.
So there's some bits in there I'm pretty scared for people to read. But I think that's probably going to be the really good stuff then.
Yeah, and obvious. Do you find that obviously it may be a fun read, but it can be used maybe as some kind of advice or
The
almost a
next
guide?
generation feminist literature, is that what you're trying to ask me, Toby?
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, like honestly, I view it as a piece of comedy. But I think the comedy that I most enjoy is political satire that
Mm,
really touches on something that you go, oh, that's so funny, but ouch, that's really true. I never thought of it like that.
yeah,
So, I would have my friends bent over laughing in stitches when I would share these stories. But usually afterwards, there would kind of be an afterthought of, Jesus Christ, it's really good that you like got out of that situation. That's it. Like that could have
yeah,
gone really badly. So, and hey, we all have those moments in life. I'm not unique in this sense. I'm just saying
yeah,
that because I dated so many people. And, like, let's be clear, these are a lot of first dates. So I'm not saying that I'm the most fantastic person ever. Maybe I'm a terrible dater because all I do is go on first and maybe second dates. But yeah, like the reason I'm writing it is so like there's some really nasty and upsetting parts of that book. And there's one chapter in particular that I put a bit of a warning at the front of it and say, look, if you've experienced a sexual assault, you may just want to skip this chapter.
mm,
So I try to break down, some of the societal questions that we all have, especially since, I started writing this book before there was ever a Me Too movement. So it's been a while in the making now. But like more and more women in particular are sharing their stories of dating, and nothing is more interesting than the actual lives of people that we know. So I just thought,
yeah,
look, let's put this out here. Let's talk about it, but like, let's talk about it in a funny way and kind of take in like the ridiculous, random stuff that happened along the way and all the fun adventures and travels and awkward moments.
yeah,
But at the end of it, reflect on like, okay, why are these things happening? What did I have to do? What part did I play in this? And what should I accept and what should I not accept? And I
Yeah.
think, to be honest, I think that young people, like people in their teens, 20s, and 30s nowadays, are much better at reflecting on these things. But even 10 years ago, I definitely wasn't. And therefore, as you will see in the book, I just kept on making the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah. And in light of the Me Too movement, do you feel it's maybe more important than ever, or almost like it's your duty to actually share these stories within the book?
I think every person has their own story. Every person has a book in them, they say.
Yeah.
I honestly, I just felt, do you know what I feel? It kind of felt like vomit in the sense that I couldn't keep it in any longer. Like
Yeah.
all of these stories, all of these experiences, and they just compounded and compounded and compounded on one another. And let's be clear, they compounded because I was not reflecting. So I just kept making the same mistakes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel a sense of not obligation, but like a wish for better things for example, my cousins who are teenagers now and who are getting started in the dating game. I kind of, like I wish upon them a far more positive experience than I had. So I guess, yeah, in a long-winded way, I'm saying yes, I do feel an obligation, because I honestly feel like we choose to suffer, and young women in particular have had the worst end of the dating game. So this is like a love letter to my younger self and all the 16-year-olds starting out on their dating adventures. To like get a little bit skittish and excited about the prospects of what's to come in your dating life. Because honest to goodness, if I look back now, if I met my 16-year-old self now and told her what was about to happen, she wouldn't believe me. She would be so excited and delighted about all of the cool stuff ahead. And
Yeah.
that is despite some of the lessons learned the hard way. So it's kind of like I offer this up to, and not just younger women, but all anyone who's brave enough to go out there dating, or indeed anyone who is lucky enough to have found a marvelous partner and not plan to go back into the dating world. I think they'll view it as a comfort.
Yes.
Thank God, I'm glad those days are behind me. Um, yeah, so a bit of a combination of those things.
Yeah. So if you had to go back in time and give your 16-year-old self, or just anybody who's new to dating, some advice, what would it be?
I have lots. Some of it I should still accept myself. Um, the first thing when it comes to dating, just for dating's sake, I would say you'll have a lot more fun and you'll actually have a more productive or better odds, shall we say, if you focus on getting to know the person and enjoying your evening or your afternoon or whenever it may be. Because what I used to do is I used to swipe on someone, plan a date, and say, okay, this is going to be the day when I meet my Mr. Forever. And I would go and meet some poor guy in a cafe or a bar or in a park with like all of these expectations on him. So obviously I was going to be disappointed when like a human met me instead of some like Disney prince, you
Yeah.
know? So I think that going in, whereas in more recent years, as I learned from my experiences, I would go in with the mindset of, okay, I'm gonna have a nice evening stroll and a beer with this person, and hey, we're just gonna have a chat. And I wouldn't prepare myself for hours and hours. I would rock up after work and take it a little bit easy. So that's probably one of the first things I'd say. And honestly, like everyone says, looks aren't that important. I definitely think that my younger years, I focused far too much on how somebody looked and not nearly enough on how he made me feel. And I think that looking at the external stuff, like how handsome, sporty, smart, successful, whatever he or she may be, I actually completely overlooked the feelings that I had when I was on these dates. And I think what I now have enjoyed a lot more in more recent years since the stories in the book were written, is just going along and, if I feel uncomfortable with a person, it doesn't matter how handsome or successful or yeah, whatever positive, attractive features he or she may have,
Yeah.
if I don't feel good in my body, if I have this feeling of, oh, I hope he likes me, I hope I can impress him, I hope this, or just an awkward nervousness, then that's probably not going to be the person who is going to be a good match with me. Whereas when I focus more on the feeling I have of like, I'm just really enjoying myself. Oh, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
One, the date is way more fun, so you're likely to have a follow-up date. And of course, the more you see someone, the better you get to know them, the easier it is to date. So that would be the second piece of advice. And the final piece would be to focus more on the person than on yourself. And maybe this
Yeah.
is super obvious to people because, we've all got fantastic podcasts and radio shows and interviews and books, biographies of people now where we've learned from their self-reflection. But when I used to focus completely on myself and how can I impress this person? I hope he likes me. What am I doing? It was all about me. And it was
Mm.
never about, hey, do I even like this guy? Like, is he interesting? Does he have his own passions? Does he have nice, happy relationships with his friends, with his family? So it was completely backwards. And what I've learned is that ironically, the more you focus on somebody else, the more they're also interested in what you have to say. So they by them opening up to you, they feel like they're sharing and they're connecting with you better. And it'll give you an assessment of how much of a weirdo or a normal human are they, which is also important for your own sake and your own time management in this busy, bustling culture that we all live in now.
Yes. But hopefully they're a weirdo in a good way.
Hmm. Good weird, and
Yes.
hey, I think as I've grown up, still not there yet, I think, but as I'm growing up, I'm learning that, there's no such thing as perfect because the more perfect a person is, the less relatable they are.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny, like in this book and in, let's say, unwritten chapters since this book, yeah, like the more attractive they are, it's like the less human, the less relatable, the less I can rely or the less I want to open up to somebody if they're superhuman, if they're perfect.
Yeah.
So flawed people are a lot more relatable because we're all flawed. We all have cracks. And I'm sure there's some lovely kintsugi Japanese art reference here where we can say, oh, you can be the gold paint that brings somebody else together or whatever. But yeah, I think we're all weird and weird is normal and normal is weird. So, go out there and ask about the other person, find out what they're into, and does their weird match your weird?
Yeah. And do you think a lot of people will be able to relate to the book?
Tragically, I think so. Like I'd say, in terms of the ages, I say this is a kind of love letter to my 16-year-old self. So
Yeah.
any teenager, frankly, there's some very explicit sex in there. So I'm sure any
Mm.
teenager would be very happy to read it. I think this will chime very well with people in their 20s and 30s, up to early 40s, kind of basically anyone who's in the dating app kind of world. This story begins before dating apps exist and or before they existed. So I think, it starts with that awkward teenage like malfunctioning, like
Mm.
when I was so nervous around boys and like I went to an all girls Irish Catholic school,
Ooh.
like boys were another species. So things that I think many people wouldn't struggle with, like you just see the most painful, awkward anxiety kick in. And like one time when I was so nervous that my whole body just started shaking. And while I was shaking and feeling nervous, I was telling myself, stop shaking, be cool, be normal.
Yeah.
So that was part of my weirdness as a teenager, just starting out in the dating world. So, but I think, whether it's shaking or whether it's fumbling or, young boys having unexpected bodily reactions as well that they can't control, like we
Mm.
can all relate to this. And the thing about dating is whether it's via an app or via friends or whether you're in your teens or whether in your 40s or 60s, we all have have those same feelings when we meet somebody that we like. We all have this sense of hope, this sense of optimism, curiosity, nervousness, like, oh, so much is riding on this. I really like her. I really like him. I hope
Yeah.
she likes it too. Like, it's just such a human feeling and experience. So I try to convey that in the book. It's not written as a story of one single story. There's lots of individual stories. They all feature different men or, boys at the time for the younger chapters.
Yeah.
And they kind of take you through this coming of age journey from like super awkward teen through to, well, relatively awkward adult, I guess.
And I take it, are the men in the book anonymized?
Yes, they have been. Well, here's the thing. Like, these are my stories, and they are
Yeah.
from my perspective. And I don't think it's fair to put something out there and place that on somebody else when it's my perception of things, and my perception isn't always fact.
Mm.
I'm fully aware of that, and I make that very clear at the beginning of the book. And while everything I have written now is true to my memory, there can also be an artistic license thrown in there.
Yeah.
And something that I've done is with the stories, I tell the story of what happened, but I also share the inner monologue of what's going on in my head. So there's a lot of,
Ooh.
no, Eric's somebody up right now. Oh, did he actually say that? Or, oh, did I actually do that? So in that sense, it's very dramatic. So, the experience that I had for something that might be totally mundane to somebody else could be really, really out of proportion. So I have anonymized, or I have changed the names of, I think, all of the men. I think there's one or two names I haven't changed in there, but literally it was so long ago, and I have zero contact with him or those one or two guys now that I don't even know. I wouldn't know their surnames, and I wouldn't even know how to identify them myself. I saw them down the street, but
Yeah.
no. But for example, where there is an English man, there's an English name. Where there is a Latino, there's a Latino name. So I've kept it similar, but different enough that they can't be Googled, shall we say?
Yeah. And I wonder if anybody will recognize themselves in the book.
I'm a little bit scared of that. So obviously, when it gets when it gets picked up and broadcast around and all these things, there are people who, friends of mine or colleagues, if they read the book, they will know exactly who the story is about. So that's undeniable. But to be honest, those friends reading the book probably already know, and they've already heard the stories, and they got a glass of wine or a dinner thrown in as well with the original rendition many years ago.
Yeah. Well, have you got any other books that you're working on? I mean, could there be a sequel to this?
Well, this is not my job. I'm a businesswoman. I just kind of did this as a side project which is why it's taken so many years, because
Yeah.
I do it on weekends. I'll sit down at a cafe and spend a couple of hours writing. So the stories I started writing while I still lived in London. And many years ago now, I've moved. And to be honest, the most interesting stories happened since I left London.
Mm.
I kind of feel like this is even the prequel to the really adventurous stuff. And I got a little bit older, a little bit more confident, and a lot more brazen, shall we say. So I'm taking a couple months off to enjoy the summer now, and settle things here once the book launches. But I've already got a few chapters of the next one, in the hard drive and ready to be added to.
Sounds exciting. And in the meantime, where can we find this book, The Misadventures of My Non-Love Life?
There is a website that is just being set up, along with Facebook and Instagram pages, and of course you can buy it on Amazon. That's probably the best place to go for a start, to go to Amazon.
Excellent. Well, many thanks for talking to us today. It's been great having you on the show.
Thanks, Toby. Really nice to be here and share some of the awkwardness with the crowds.